something. So this is a poem called Meeting Pessoa, the great poet. And it starts, I moved the orange mass from right to left. I took 2 steps backward and glanced. I noticed no difference. I approached the table. I lifted the thought of the cellar 2 meters up. I stood on the chair and glanced. I noticed no difference. I closed my eyes and imagined myself with Pessoa at some seaside cafe, talking about God and trees and broken fans. We were nudged by a light boredom like a rain shower outside. He leaves in his long black coat and his hat like a huge coffee bean, as if he's a spy working for infinity, while I hopelessly open my eyes and return to move that orange mass from left to right, as if I haven't learned a thing in 20 years. With Firas's and Samantha's permission, I'm going to read a favorite poem of mine about God and called God. God is now afraid in his cellar, like nobody could ever imagine. Too old, untouched by time, unable to lean onto the tired shoulder of his memories. He needs no metaphor to prove how much he trembles. He says no words. Afresh, he sags in the ancient inns of essence. In the narrow, taut moment between what happens and what didn't happen, God, who's scared of everything, glowing in the shackles. I am the God they lost when they got found. It's time to lean on myself and cry, with no one to help shake off the universal mosquitoes that land on my dreams. Glory unto me, how I accepted the trick until my heart putrefied. How I accepted the name, knowing it would be embodied. Glory unto me, how I bestowed upon them my labyrinth as a question to create me from mud and fear. I am God. It is time for me to send my angels and my soldiers into retirement, to turn heaven and hell into a swing. It's time to leave this throne to emptiness, or at least to the humidity of my regrets. God desires to sweat, to get tired, to sleep, to go to the market, to feel the candy melt in his pocket, hidden from his greedy friends, to gamble, to get scared, to lust after beautiful women, then isolate himself lonely in his room to become like ordinary people or failed geniuses, to cloister himself to be different, to stay up as a lover, as a guard, as ill, to become a father of a good or a bad boy. He desires to demonstrate against himself, to argue with those who replaced him with something worse. He desires to be misunderstood in another way, to write a forgettable book, to weep and get sympathy, to love nature, to hate life made by men whose pictures fill the screens. He desires to be so simple and naive as his believers, as pretentious as those who don't believe in him, and as lost and sensitive as those who are still considering him. He desires to love a woman, seek shelter in her, then get bored with her. God desires to be a woman and to know why the music turns him into a wide moment imprisoned in form. God desires to rip off the tight, loose shirt of the word, to succumb to the calls of his body. God desires to dream, desires to live. Live, then, no matter if he dies tomorrow or after tomorrow, God desires to be. this, in a way, we should read, because otherwise the poet, the immortal poet in Firas, who writes about immortal themes and writes about God and love and loneliness, also is the man who suffers through the nightmare of his homeland. And it's not as if he never writes about it. So I'm going to read the end that recurs non-stop. What do they do in the war? Some of them grind the bones and the skulls as fast as they can in order to forget that they have become killers. From behind the ramparts, from behind the corpses of one another, they open fire on other corpses. Some exploit the storming silences to squeeze their hearts on the cold ground in a cracked night waiting for daytime, which might come to tie what's left of veins and arteries and the broken breaths of their brothers. Children, women, and the elderly dangle from a hole in the air's wall, separating the fighting fronts as seaweed dangles from boats full of blood. In the end, this repeats non-stop. Some watch in terror the disintegration of names and things and divide the regret by so many numbers, then toss it randomly. In the end, this repeats non-stop. The living try to spit, to scream until their guts explode in decay. The rightness of history explodes into fatal mistakes. In the end, this repeats non-stop. All are waiting, servile. Each side goes armed with its coffins. Each side is a memory badly drawn. Must the refugees thank God that their tents have no windows from which to view the ruined sky? Those fleeing from death who haven't yet died, they live as echoes in places that no longer exist, live in the bloodied shelter of recollections. God melts as a sharp, fatal tool in the hands of the blind. Each holy text, a belly of evils. Each interpretation, an assault. Because the dictator sees only his photograph, and because he's not used to seeing his photograph shaking, he doesn't believe it. He sits in the frozen moment thinking that he makes history. The dictator isn't lacking for nationalists, those who stabilize what he loves to see, only his photograph. Now, when the photograph shakes, everyone sees except for him. He doesn't see, he doesn't hear. He only has his delusions and his commands. But the people tear your photographs now, O dictator. The dictator steps from his bubble, his moment. And when he does, he steps only to suppress, to restrain, to kill, to represent the future in his past. If he steps out, he does so only to enact his ending. But we, who thought that the stage was prepared for our voices, our feet, realize now that we were just slow walkers in a long corridor leading to some outside. The killers who were and still are among us, and whose nativities we used to shove with our elbows with a lot of arrogance and a little sympathy, now they occupy the space. The killed and those who will be killed, whose screams and cries rise above, who come from the sharp colors of life, turn the stage upside down while we, in our long corridor, we who used to think about exits, we are lost, weeping now. And their leader said, "You can smooth over this land of holes with corpses. In this cursed East, the nation also has a lifespan. In the war, the futility that struggles for its purity can escape the meaning that created it. In the war, when you are watching all this death, stroke the shoulder of the corpse sitting beside you. And if you were alone, stroke your own shoulder. In the war, you can call the hole in the tank a wound. In the war, pain has neither harmony nor dissonance.